Rising proudly in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, the Westin Peachtree Plaza Hotel is a majestic skyscraper. Adjacent to the Peachtree Center complex and the former Davison's Macy's flagship store, it boasts an impressive 1,073 rooms. This towering structure ranks as the 4th tallest hotel in the Western Hemisphere and the 30th tallest among all hotels worldwide. Notably, it houses the celebrated Sundial Restaurant, renowned for its exquisite blend of classic French and modern culinary delights. However, beneath its splendid exterior lies a somber narrative. The Sundial Restaurant is ingeniously constructed on a mechanism that allows it to rotate slowly, resembling the movement of a clock. On April 14, 2017, 5-year-old Charlie Holt was in attendance at the Sundial Restaurant, with his family seated at a table. It is rumored by the staff that Charlie left the seated area and began to wander around the restaurant. However, this is disputed by his family. Charlie's head became entrapped in a 5-inch gap between the furniture in the dining area and the wall as the floor rotated. The family's waiter reportedly jumped a staircase to turn off the floor's rotation, and as many as 6 people assisted in the effort to free the trapped boy, who lost consciousness after being pulled free. The boy's father performed CPR on him until the paramedics arrived. The child, who had just turned 5 less than a month before the accident, was transported to Grady Hospital, where he later died of his injuries. Following the tragic incident, attorney Joseph Freed represented Rebecca and Michael Holt, grieving parents from North Carolina, in taking legal action. Their lawsuit challenges initial police reports, claiming that Charlie didn't wander off but got trapped between a booth and a stationary wall as they were leaving the restaurant. Despite their frantic efforts to rescue him, they couldn't free him until a restaurant employee stopped the rotation. As a result, although the restaurant remains open, its rotating feature has been halted indefinitely. The lawsuit also highlights the absence of sufficient safety measures to prevent such accidents, including the lack of an emergency stop mechanism. The settlement, which was for an undisclosed amount, was agreed to by both the Holt family and Marriott International, Inc., the statement noted. Property owners have the legal responsibility to search out and mitigate hazards that can cause a guest to become injured, as Charlie Holt was by a dangerous feature at the restaurant. In the neighborhood of Kamisoshigaya, Tokyo, on the night of December 30, 2000, an event took place that would not only shock the residents of the area, but would also shock the world. What should have been a joyous transition into the new year for the Miyazawa family turned into a nightmare, a night so twisted and unpredictable no one could have seen this coming. The family, consisting of husband Mikio, 44, wife Yasuko, 41, their daughter Niina, 8, and their son, Rei, 6, lived in the suburbs of Setagaya. On the night of December 30th to the 31st, at around 11:30 p.m. to 12:05 a.m. midnight, an assassin would enter the family's home and wreak havoc. Brazen and confident in their crime, the assassin would stay in the home for hours, speculated to be from 2 to 10 hours after the crimes had been committed. The intruder gained access into the family's home via an open window. He accessed the Miyazawa residence by scaling a nearby tree and silently removing the window screen. Quiet as a shadow, they crept into the second-floor bedroom where young Rei lay innocently. Chilling and cold-hearted, the assailant would eliminate young Rei via means of suffocating the lungs of air. Detecting a struggle and menacing sound coming from the second floor where young Rei slept, Mikio rushed up the stairs frantically. He was met by the assailant holding an sashimi bocho knife. Undeterred, he fought the assailant, resulting in a struggle of power. Mikio was pierced in the head with the sashimi bocho knife. The force in which it was struck was so strong that it broke off in his skull. The two males now out of the way, the intruder then hunted down Yasuko and Niina in a more than terrifying ordeal, attacking them with the broken knife and then a santoku knife from the house to eliminate them. The assassin, unfazed by their merciless actions, remained in the home for many hours, leaving DNA evidence all around the home, taunting or maybe even mocking the police. After the brutal attack, the killer patched up their own wounds using the family's first aid supplies. Exhausted, they crashed on the living room sofa upstairs for a nap and unplugged the phone line. The killer used the family's computer, ate 4 ice creams from their refrigerator, 4 bottles of barley tea, and even used the family's toilet, defecating in it without flushing. The house was torn apart. Drawers were rifled through, papers scattered everywhere, and even some were dumped in the bathroom. The assassin grabbed some cash but left most behind. On the sofa, they left behind a chilling collection of items: a knife, a scarf, a bag, a sweater, a jacket, a hat, gloves, shoes, and 2 handkerchiefs, each carrying the weight of the night's horrors. Yasuko's mother, Haruko, arrived at the home the next morning as she had become suspicious after trying to call the home. But the line was cut. She was unfortunately the first person to discover the gruesome murders. With all the evidence left in the residence, the police should have had an easy time catching the criminal. However, this was not the case. The assassin, estimated to be around 170 centimeters tall and thin, born between 1965 and 1985, likely possesses right-handed dominance, evident from the wounds inflicted on the Miyazawa family. Despite leaving behind DNA and fingerprints, none match existing criminal records, hinting at a lack of prior offenses. Analysis of the perpetrator's blood revealed type A. His DNA also suggested a male of mixed-race descent. Maternal DNA points to European heritage, possibly from a South European country, while paternal DNA indicated East Asian origins. Furthermore, clues abound in the clothing and items abandoned at the scene. The killer's dietary habits, evidenced by traces of string beans and sesame seeds in their feces, offer insight into their recent activities. Their apparel, including a distinctive sweater, was traced back to Kanagawa Prefecture, while sand found in a hip bag originated from specific locations in the Nevada desert and a skate park in Japan. Despite these detailed leads, authorities remain unable to identify or apprehend the elusive suspect. The investigation into the Setagaya murders stands as one of Japan's largest, involving over 246,000 investigators who meticulously gathered over 12,500 pieces of evidence. Despite this exhaustive effort, the case remains unresolved, with all evidence securely held by authorities. As of December 2021, a 20 million yen reward still stands for any information leading to the arrest of the killer. Since 2015, a dedicated team of officers, numbering up to 40 at one point, have been tirelessly working on the case. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, TMPD, continues to honor the victims with annual memorial ceremonies at the Miyazawa house, a somber reminder of the tragedy that befell the family. However, the investigation has not been without controversy. In 2015, Aniri, the sister of victim Yasuko Miyazawa, filed a complaint against a TV Asahi documentary alleging misrepresentation of her sister's character. Despite such challenges, the pursuit of justice persists. In 2019, plans were announced to demolish the Miyazawa house due to structural concerns, though this decision was met with opposition from the family and supporters. Despite reassurances that the demolition would not affect the investigation, the emotional attachment to the site remains palpable. In 2022, the podcast Faceless, hosted by author Nicholas Obregon, offered a fresh perspective on the case, questioning established narratives and shedding light on overlooked details. Through interviews with former TMPD chief Takeshi Tsuchita and Setsuko Miyazawa, the search for answers continues. Despite the passage of 23 years, the TMPD remains vigilant, renewing appeals for public assistance. The heinous nature of the crime, in which Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei were brutally murdered in their home, continues to haunt the consciousness. The killer's meticulous actions, including post-crime computer usage and consumption of ice cream, paints a chilling picture of their calculated depravity. Despite extensive analysis of the killer's clothing, accessories, and other circumstantial evidence, No suspects have been identified. The killer's unique genetic profile, a blend of European and Asian ancestry, remains a crucial clue. With over 280,000 officers involved and thousands of public tips received, the hunt for justice presses on, fueled by the unwavering commitment of law enforcement. Until the day the perpetrator is brought to justice, the Setagaya murders will continue to cast a long shadow over Japan's criminal history. Jesse Kerchevsky, born on February 18, 1984, lived in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and worked as a dental assistant. In 2016, she became a carer for a family friend named Lynn Hernan. This job would be her last, as her thirst for greed would consume her morals entirely. Lynn Hernan, a 62-year-old hairstylist, faced numerous health challenges, including chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. Residing in Meadowgrass Circle, she relied on Jessie, a hands-on caregiver who visited her daily to assist with various tasks. Over time, Jessie was entrusted with power of attorney, granting her full control over Lynn's financial affairs. On Wednesday, October 3, 2018, at 4:55 p.m., Jessie made a distress call to the police, reporting Lynn's unconscious state. Rushing to the scene, officers discovered Lynn deceased in her recliner with crushed pills scattered all over her chest and on a nearby plate. At first glance, it appeared to be a tragic overdose, a sad end to a life besieged by health challenges. But beneath the surface lurked something far more sinister. Jessie proceeded to tell officers that Lynn hadn't been herself lately, stating she had been throwing away bills and claiming that she could not trust the hospital as they were trying to steal all her money. Additionally, she had told the police that Lynn had experienced thoughts of self-erasing due to her health condition and had voiced distrust towards the hospital, claiming they were withholding information and expressing a desire to avoid nursing homes. Jessie also mentioned her routine of checking Lynn's pills, noting inconsistencies in consumption, suggesting Lynn may not have been adhering to prescribed medication. Despite these explanations, the police found no cause for suspicion. However, Lynn's family members grew concerned when they discovered Jessie inherited Lynn's entire estate after her death, an unexpected turn of events that raised suspicions. As Jessie's greed became apparent, she began selling off Lynn's belongings, a move seen as peculiar given the circumstances. In January 2019, the autopsy results shocked everyone involved. The Waukesha County Sheriff's Office reopened the investigation roughly 3 months after Hernan's death, when the toxicological report showed Hernan had a fatal dose of tetrahydrozoline, the main ingredient in over-the-counter eye drops, in her system. This revelation prompted authorities to reclassify her death as a homicide. Jessie was promptly informed of these findings. During the subsequent inquiry, investigators raised suspicions about the crushed tablets found at the scene, suggesting they may have been staged to simulate an overdose. They noted the absence of any eye drop packaging in Lynn's home, which cast doubt on Jessie's explanation. Initially, Jessie insisted that Lynn had purchased large quantities of eye drops and named a specific brand, vehemently denying any involvement in Lynn's death. She also claimed ignorance regarding the potential use of eye drops as a lethal poison. However, as investigators pressed further, Jessie's story evolved. She admitted to witnessing Lynn mix the eye drop solution into water bottles with vodka, which Lynn then consumed. This revelation added a chilling layer to the investigation, implicating Jessie in a potentially premeditated act of poisoning. Despite her changing narrative, Jessie continued to maintain her innocence. Upon delving into Lynn's financial records, authorities uncovered alarming discrepancies. Approximately $290,000 had been siphoned from Lynn's accounts over an extended period, with evidence pointing to Jessie's involvement. Transactions revealed a pattern of financial exploitation, including gambling activities and the unauthorized opening of credit cards and retail accounts in Lynn's name. Following legal proceedings, Kaczewski was convicted of 1 felony count of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of theft, each involving movable property valued at over $10,000 but less than $100,000. Sentencing is scheduled for 1:30 p.m. on December 7th. Jessie received a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Additionally, she was handed down consecutive 5-year sentences for each theft charge. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Jessie persists in asserting her innocence. Crime Watch, formerly known as Crime Watch UK, stands as a renowned British live television show crafted by the BBC. Its primary objective is to reconstruct significant unsolved crimes, urging the public to share vital information to aid in their resolution. More than just a news programme, it resonated deeply with British history, providing citizens with a platform to actively participate in solving crimes nationwide. With the option for viewers to call in with new information and live crime updates, the show instilled a sense of involvement and urgency, fostering the belief that crimes were actively being solved as they were. Jill Dando, born on November 9, 1961, was an English journalist and TV presenter. A prominent presenter on Crime Watch UK, she played a pivotal role in the show's success. Through her engaging presentation style, she effectively connected with the audience, making her and her fellow presenters recognizable figures. Their presence on such a high-profile British TV show further solidified their status as household names. Jill spent most of her career at the BBC, where she earned awards for her excellent presenting skills and friendly personality. Jill was born in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset, at Ashcombe House Maternity Home. Her parents were Jack Dando and Winifred Mary Jean Hockey. Jill had one brother, Nigel, who worked as a journalist for BBC Radio Bristol until his retirement in 2017. Starting as a trainee reporter at the local Western Mercury, where her family already had roots, she quickly proved her mettle. Transitioning to the BBC after 5 years, she made her mark, starting with radio before moving on to regional television. Her move to national television in London in the late 1980s was a significant leap, where she became the face of short hourly news bulletins on BBC One and BBC Two. On the morning of April 26, 1999, at 37 years old, Jill Dando departed from Farthing's home in Chiswick. She returned alone, driving to her house at 29 Gowan Avenue, Fulham. Although she owned the property, she was in the process of selling it and didn't visit frequently. Her purpose on this visit was to retrieve contract documents faxed by her agent, John Roseman. As she reached her front door around 11:32 a.m., tragedy struck. She was suddenly seized from behind. The assailant forcefully brought her to the ground, shooting her once in the left temple just as she was about to unlock her front door. The shot was fatal, instantly ending her life. Dando was shot once in the head. Her body was discovered about 14 minutes later by her neighbour. Helen Doble, who recounted crossing the road on Gowan Avenue that day, observed Jill's car parked and glanced at her front door. She was shocked immediately by the scene in which she had encountered. She frantically contacted the police and ambulance. At the onset, scrutiny focused on individuals within Dando's personal circle, as only a handful were aware of her intention to visit her Gowan Avenue house that day. Her agent, John Roseman, initially came under suspicion due to his knowledge of Dando's visit to collect faxes he had sent her. However, Roseman was able to convince detectives of his innocence. Similarly, Bob Wheaton attracted attention as a former romantic partner, particularly since Dando had transferred funds to him towards the end of their relationship. Wheaton maintained that this transfer was a gift, successfully persuading investigators of his innocence. As the investigators looked for more clues, the forensic analysis of the cartridge case and bullet recovered from the crime scene indicated that the weapon used may have been a workshop-modified replica or decommissioned firearm. It was deemed unlikely that a professional assassin would utilize such a low-quality weapon. This compelled detectives to seek a revised profile, honing in on individuals displaying wannabe characteristics, an inclination towards isolation, potential mental health challenges, and signs of a disturbed mindset. Amidst this search, one individual caught their attention. With no substantial leads to pursue, law enforcement redirected their focus towards Barry George, who resided approximately half a mile from Dando's home. George's background aligned with the profile under scrutiny. Police uncovered various pieces of evidence implicating George. He was observed attempting to flee the area in a taxi after the murder. He had maps of Dando Street, magazine cuttings featuring Dando, and paraphernalia associated with weapons. An intensive look into Barry's criminal background revealed George's criminal history is intricate and extensive. He began his illicit activities by assuming false identities, using the pseudonym Paul Gadd, the real name of singer Gary Glitter, during his school years. His first encounter with the law occurred in March 1980, when he was arrested for impersonating a police officer, complete with false warrant cards. In addition to his impersonation schemes, George's criminal behavior extended to fraudulent claims, such as falsely asserting himself as the winner of the British Karate Championship. Moreover, George faced charges of indecent assault on multiple occasions, leading to a suspended sentence for one count and a prison term for another. He was also convicted of attempted rape and served a substantial portion of a 33-month sentence. Further complicating his criminal history, George was found in suspicious circumstances in the grounds of Kensington Palace, wearing a balaclava and carrying a poem addressed to Prince Charles. His personal relationships were also fraught with violence, as evidenced by reports from his Japanese spouse, Itsuko Toide, who described their marriage as violent and terrifying. Following surveillance, George was apprehended on May 25, 2000, and formally charged with Dando's murder on May 28 of the same year. Barry George's involvement in the murder of British journalist Jill Dando came under intense scrutiny. Following his conviction, the public, as well as close relatives and friends of Dando, were skeptical that a guy of Barry's intellect could carry out such a crime, especially in broad daylight. The investigation initially focused on the possibility of Dando being targeted by a stalker. The only confirmed sighting of the killer, described as a 6-foot-tall white man around 40 years old, fitting George's general description. Forensic analysis of George's coat discovered a single particle of gunshot residue, which raised suspicion. This particle contained the same elements of gunshot residue found at the crime scene, including on a cartridge case and head hair. In 2002, George appealed with his legal team arguing the reliability of the forensic evidence. This appeal was dismissed. 4 years later, in March 2006, George's legal team appealed his conviction, presenting new medical evidence indicating his incapacity due to mental disabilities. Neuropsychiatrist Michael Kopelman disputed prosecution claims of personality disorders, stating George's inability to respond adequately. Kopelman's testimony emphasized George's lack of calculated behavior, casting doubt on his capacity to commit the crime in question. The defense also argued that 2 new witnesses claimed they saw armed police during George's arrest, contradicting official reports stating otherwise. The Metropolitan Police denied having armed officers present during George's arrest. Additionally, the defense contested the scientific evidence linking George to the crime. They suggested that the presence of armed officers could have led to contamination. The Criminal Cases Review Commission referred George's case to the Court of Appeal on June 20, 2007. Despite being refused bail, George's hearing began on November 5, 2007. The defense argued that the gunshot residue found on George's coat was not conclusive evidence, potentially contaminated during police evidence photography. On November 7, 2007, the Court of Appeal reserved judgment, and on November 15, 2007, they allowed the appeal, quashing George's conviction. The court reasoned that the prosecution heavily relied on 4 categories of evidence, including witness identification, alleged lies by George, an alleged false alibi, and the single particle of firearm discharge residue. Consequently, the Court of Appeal determined that if this evidence had been presented to the jury during the trial, George's conviction may not have occurred. Therefore, a retrial was ordered, and George remained in custody without applying for bail. The retrial began officially on June 9, 2008. The prosecution presented minimal scientific evidence due to the inadmissibility of forensic evidence related to gunshot residue, so they had limited to nothing left to present. George's character assessment was allowed, enabled by the Criminal Justice Act 2003. In his defense, William Clegg QC highlighted testimony from 3 women from Hafad, which conflicted with the prosecution's timeline of events. Despite witnesses possibly citing the heading in a different direction after the shooting, they failed to identify George in an identification parade. Ultimately, the trial concluded with George's acquittal on August 1, 2008. This next story will be eerily familiar. A gruesome scene from Hereditary could have been inspired by a real-life event. John Kemper Hutchison, a then 21-year-old, and his longtime friend Frankie Broome, 23, were heading back from a night of drinking at a bar. Nights out like this were nothing unusual for the pair. Francis Daniel Broome complained of feeling unwell, and the young men, both incredibly drunk, decided to call it a night. John, completely drunken, decided to drive home, a terrible decision he made that night. Frankie was hanging his head out the passenger's window, emptying the contents of his stomach, whilst John Kemper, the driver, ran off the road and sideswiped a telephone pole support wire, decapitating his best friend. He then drove around 12 miles back to his Atlanta home, early Sunday, and went to sleep in his clothes, leaving the headless body in the truck. A neighbor walking with his baby daughter that Sunday discovered the 23-year-old's headless corpse in the parked truck and called authorities. The head was found in the bushes near the pole. Hutchison was found still in bed, soaked in bloody clothing, fast asleep. He was awoken by the police, who told him of the event. He had no recollection at all and was rumored to be very remorseful. An attorney for the Broome family asked for leniency for Hutchison, who was a childhood friend of the victim. Alcoholics Anonymous counselors also were among the witnesses who spoke on his behalf. Hutchison was jailed on $100,000 bail and was sentenced to 5 years in prison on May 2005.